Hello, everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Your Royal Highness, Your Excellencies, thank you so much for joining us. We have 27 minutes to rethink the global energy complex. I know you do this every day. You are experts in your field. You, of course, have a lot to say about what we'll see ahead. The economic recovery.
Any chance for making it 3 minutes?
In 3 minutes. I'm not sure we'll even get the first question in 3 minutes. Your Highness, when you look at the energy complex right now and what we're seeing in China with the economy, a lot of concerns about a US recession, where are we? Does it vindicate OPEC's decision to cut production in the last quarters?
Well, I want to assert a much better vindication. First of all, I'm very grateful for the attendance of His Royal Highness Sheikh Tamim. It's been an honor to be here, although I don't call myself a guest. I'm part of this country and part of the family. And I intend to compete with the Saudis and both men and women who came to the World Cup and brought joy and passion and demonstrate that joy and passion and love for this country and its people. So where I am and what I am here for is that and that precisely. The other things are details.
Details that change, of course, the energy complex for everyone.
Yeah, but you know, we are relaxed people. We take things in a different latitude. We are focused on the bigger picture. Yes, the nuances of the day and tomorrow and after tomorrow are crucial, but we deal with them tactically. We in Saudi Arabia do have a vision. It's called 2030. This is our main drive. Everything revolve and evolve around it. So whatever, if people sometimes ask what they intend to do here and there, all what I need to tell them, just go back and read what we have put together in that vision. And you will find all of your answers. Now, in today's environment, my colleagues here will tell you that we are dealing with such a volatile situations. Almost all of them have been generated and created for nothing that we have had anything to do with. However, realistically, we have to handle it and deal with it in an amicable way, again, but not losing sight of our future trajectory. It is unfortunate that we have to be vigilant, we have to be proactive, as we have in OPEC Plus have been saying for quite some time. I think the three adjectives that people need to continue to remember is being proactive, preemptive, and the new word that we have injected in our language is we have to also be hedger of what may come, not necessarily that we are issuing a judgment about it, but the message I would like to bring here is that the whole world needs not to forget that we have a future, and we should be brave enough, courageous enough to attend to that future without continuing the so-called kicking the can policies, those policies that may allow us to fend the situation for this month, next month, or even the month after. But with that, we're losing sight of our intentions and our more extreme important objectives.
Thank you, Minister. Minister Abdul Ghani, when you look at the trajectory that we could see in terms of supply and demand for oil over the next 12 months, how do you see it going? Are you concerned that there's not enough demand from places in the world?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أنا سعيد أن أكون في هذا
In the name of God, the merciful, the compassionate, I'm so glad to be with you in the Economic Forum. This is my first participation in this forum. As far as your question is concerned, and as far as the latest agreement of the OPEC and OPEC Plus, we, the representatives of Iraq, we are committed to put into place the results and the outcomes of the last meeting. We are committed to reducing, the oil supplies, but without affecting the world economy. As you may be aware, Iraq, despite all the economic problems that we have been through, but we have been always committed to abide by the outcomes and by the results of the OPEC meetings. And we have always endeavored to keep the stability in order to help the growth of the global economy. Realistically, the first agreement that we have embraced and that started in December 2022, we were committed to what we said. We are committed to reducing, the production. I'm talking about the Iraqi supplies. And at the same time, we are also committed to the latest agreement. OPEC, this pertains to the latest agreement of the OPEC Plus, and there is a commitment from all the participants, and thanks God, we have been able to keep the stability. We didn't affect the world market adversely, if I might say so. And at the same time, of course, the supplies are good. And we can see that there is instability. We are committed, as I said, to the latest agreements, and there is no scarcity in the supplies.
Thank you so much, Minister. And
Shukran
we'll talk a
jazilan.
little bit more about whether you see more scarcity in the future. Minister, of course, your focus is on gas. Can you tell us whether you're on track to increase production of LNG by 60% by 2027, and whether you can also surpass that, given the need for gas in the world?
First, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to this panel, and I'm honored to have His Highness and all the guest leaders attend our panel. Regarding the gas development and the future, we see as a big picture, you were asking about supply-demand. We think that there is going to be a big shortage in gas in the future, predominantly due to the energy transition push that is, we would say, really very aggressive without studying it properly. Because if you look at economic stability and environmental responsibility, they're not mutually exclusive. You have to have both. And when you push some countries to doing that, and you ruin their economy, I think that doesn't help humanity in general. If you look at the future, whether it's gas or oil, there is going to be a shortage due to the decade-long lack of investment, whether it's in oil or gas, due to this push for the transition. I'm thrilled, actually, that finally the G7, in their final communique, have said that we need more LNG to be supplied to the world. We've been saying this for the last 10 years, and we're actually implementing what you just mentioned. We're producing 77 million tons per day of tons per annum of LNG today. We are going to go to 126 million tons in Qatar, and it's on track. All the contracts have been awarded to start in 26. In addition to that, we have about 18 million tons that will be coming from our project in the US, Golden Pass Terminal. So we're adding 65 million tons to the world's needs. When people were saying we didn't need it, I'm happy the G7 now agree that we need even more.
So would you also be prepared, would you be able to put more production if the world needs it? Because this is something that, as you say, the G7 said for the first time.
Yes. We don't follow what people say we should do. We do what technically is possible for our fields, but we always will have a track. we will have a plan to look at what we can do in the future, and when it's the right time and technically we can do it, we'll definitely do more.
Your Highness, how do you see supply and demand changing in the next 2 years?
Just as a follow-up with Saad, you know, unfortunately, I'm known for being quite a cynical, sometimes sarcastic person. So it's not all about switching the valve, turning the valve, tilting the pipe. These things takes a lot of time and a lot of investment. And for investors to do what is needed, they need certainty. We have a huge certainty gap. That's the real picture. Again, I have to emphasize, people are too much driven by the policies of the month and 2 and 3. Somehow, I'm not in the horses business, but in the UK and elsewhere, they have what they call them blinkers or blinders. Now, those two things, they used to put them on the sides of the two horses. Now we have a policy blinkers, and they are putting it in the front of the policymaker, which is make sure that whatever you do can get you on a day-to-day basis or a month-to-month basis or a maybe 6 months basis. People are really not daring enough to see the bigger picture and the longer-term picture. If they gaze to that picture with all these convoluting things that are happening in the form of transitioning, in the form of actual existent elements of uncertainty driven by the fact there is no clarity on what would be the policies of the future, it actually makes it very apprehensive for an investor to invest. And even from the producer's side, be it whatever it is, including, by the way, hydrogen. You know, people talk about hydrogen as the fuel of the future. I ask you, who is going to be the off-taker? And where is the price for hydrogen today? We go around, Saad, you go around, talking about blue, green, purple, pink hydrogen. But in the final analysis, who is going to be the off-taker? What would be the price of hydrogen? We're not talking oil. We're not talking gas. We're talking about the so-called cleanest of cleanest future, fuel of the future. And yet, you don't have the off-takers because, again, there are no clear policies for the off-taker to say, I have been given an incentive package that would enable me to buy that hydrogen, even green hydrogen, for that price for producers to produce it. If this is happening to hydrogen, and what we saw in Europe in terms of power last autumn, rescued by a gift of God that the winter was not as cold as was projected. How on earth one can envisage an energy future with all this uncertainty and, more important, with all these big questions that are not being answered?
Your Highness, I understand your frustration about the short term, and I understand that you maybe don't want to talk about what OPEC will do next, but we're in such a difficult economic environment, and you really have a front row seat in understanding what kind of economy we'll be left with. Why have we seen prices where they are?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that question, but I would have to backpedal if you allow me. Now, we were, as OPEC Plus, blamed in October, blamed in April. Who has the right numbers? Who gauged the situation in a much more, I would say, responsible way, but a tentative way? And what was our endeavor? Where we are price gougers or market stabilizers? I think over the last 6, 7 months, we've proven to be a responsible regulatory institution. Had we had not had that, look at what happened to the other sources of energy in 22. What we need to do in the future, continue delivering in our authority. Because if you check what happened with all these so-called projections and forecasters, and I hope you can just give me a few seconds, look who did the most in trying to bring forecasts and data and projections that really created most of the volatility that we've had in 22 and continue to do so. I mean, there is an organization called the IEA. I think they have, proven that it really takes a special talent to be consistently wrong, and that's exactly what they have done. Who put together that Russia production will decline 3 million? What happened? None of that happened. Policies were made in the form of SPR draws as a result of that. Where was the use for it? Look at where we are now. Energy security is being shackled. We're running out of capacities because countries are not investing, both in oil and gas. We have a very funny trajectory of where demand would be. So if you are a hedger, as we are, we will have to take action to preempt any possibility of further volatility. And that's the challenge that we are forthrightly accepting the challenge, and we will continue attending to the challenge.
Talking about volatility, I want to ask you about short sellers, but we'll come to that in a second. Minister, how do you explain the price of oil down by 10%? Can you tell us whether you think Russia is compliant with some of their cuts, and what happens to prices going forward?
Regarding what?
Oil price.
Okay. يعني أنا حقيقة
Truly,
أريد أستثمر هذه
I would like to seize the opportunity. I would like to seize this opportunity
وأريد أركز يعني
in order to focus on a very important topic and a very important issue. The issue of energy in Iraq. We, as representatives of the government of Iraq, we are committed to supply the international market with the necessary energy based on our resources. And one of the indicators and one of our most important mission is to increase investment in gas, in the gas energy. This is the most important challenge for the time being, and there are so many promising projects for the time being in Iraq in order to put into place our vision. And this begins with the investment in the gas energy. As I said, in Iraq we have two different types of gas, but for the time being, we are investing in the gas energy and a highest percentage. And we are producing 40% of our gas resources for the time being. But there are so many other challenges. We are committed to put into place so many projects, as I said, and one of the projects we have a partnership with the Shell company pertaining in the production of gas in Al-Basra, precisely. And there are two projects. We would like to increase the production of gas, reaching more than 400 million cubic meters. And the first phase of the project will be by the end of this month. And by the end of this year, we will put into place the second phase, as I said, of gas energy in different parts of Iraq. And this will help a lot. Added to that, we have signed an agreement with Total, the French company, and this pertains to the production of more than 600 million cubic meters of gas.
من 5 حقول
And
رئيسية
there are 5 oil fields that will be used
هذه خلال 5 سنوات إن شاء الله سيتم
within the next 5 years. All these projects that I have mentioned, and once again I would like to seize the opportunity and my presence to say that we said that we are open to the international investment. This is, of course, the phase of the fifth phase of gas investment and oil investment is now open, and this pertains, of course, to the oil fields in Iraq and the one shared with Iran. So the objective from these projects is to increase the production of gas energy. Added to that, I have to say that there will be a 6th investment phase, and we will provide the investors with the details of this investment phase that pertains to the oil fields shared between Syria and Saudi Arabia. We will give you the details within 1 month or 1 month and a half, and I would like to seize the opportunity to encourage the companies and the investors to come to Iraq and to take part in this project.
That's a very clear business pitch for the people in the room. Very quickly, Minister, you have 500,000 barrels a day off the global market because of the northern fields that grow through Hayan in Turkey. When will that reopen?
What do you mean?
So you have one of the ports that you're not exporting through Turkey. Will that reopen?
حق تركيا.
شلون؟
تركيا صادق.
فيما يخص الموضوع
As far as the export of oil from the north of Iraq, truly there are some negotiations following the judgments of the Court of Paris, and Turkey was not permitted to export oil from the oil field that you mentioned, but thanks to the negotiations that we have embraced, thanks to the fruitful partnership with our colleagues from Turkey, and now we have been able Now we are able to export the oil production, and we were able to sign these agreements recently, and we have signed the 4 contracts allowing us to export oil from that part of Iraq, and we have informed our counterparts in Turkey that we are able to do so, and our colleagues from Turkey, they said that there are some evaluative issues that they have to take into account, and that resulted from the earthquake that hit Turkey. We are waiting for their response, but we are open to do so, and there will be an Iraqi delegation to be sent to Turkey in order to make sure that oil export can be possible from this oil field.
When you look at LNG supply, you've had one of the biggest contracts with China. Will you have a lot more contracts with Asia this year, and will they be also very long-term for the North Field expansion?
Yes, we signed a large contract with China. We have other deals that we are working on. We potentially, with so many deals, we're just lining up people to negotiate with because we're just so busy. And there is a potential that we will run out of all the gas from the NFE and NFS by the end of the year as far as long-term contracts. That's how busy we are. There is very big demand.
Yeah, longer term, how do you see the energy complex changing? The energy complex for the world changing?
You need a mix of all energy sources, and people need to realize that you need this mix. You need oil, you need gas, you need renewables. People talk about renewables as if it's the fix-all. If you look at renewables, you can generate electricity from wind and solar. But you can't manufacture plastics and things that you have in this room that are all manufactured. Makeup for women, creams. There are a lot of things that go, you have oil and gas products that go into it from refining and so on. So you can't do away with it. Panels in your cars and so on. So renewables, as far as just saying generating electricity, does not solve the problem. You need a proper energy mix, and it can't be driven by just politics and politicians want to get into a seat to say this is the solution. It sells, you know, it's a nice pitch to say energy transition, but when you dig down and look at the reality, it's not achievable. And I think the signal from the G7 today attests to that.
So you see that changing?
I think it's already changing, and people are realizing that reality is kicking in, and you actually need. The only thing that saved, I think, humanity and Europe this year was a warm winter, and you know, the slowdown in the economy worldwide. If the economy starts churning back up in 24, and you have a reasonable, just a regular winter, I think the worst is yet to come. If they don't realize that and have a proper plan and sit down with producers and oil and gas companies and not demonize them, and you know, reality will kick in, and I think we'll have a sensible solution. But you need a mix of all.
We're almost out of time, but Your Highness, do you worry about short sellers or anything in the market that worries you?
Well, I was asked once, are you worrying? I don't worry. I think. You know, I do myself. I save my neck by not worrying, and I focus on thinking. So I don't worry. I think speculators, like anything in any market, they are there to stay. I keep advising them that they will be ouching. They did ouch in April. I don't have to show my cards. I'm not a poker player, and I don't know how to play poker, but I got it from a movie somewhere. But I would just tell them, watch out.
All right. Thank you so much for a very informative panel.
Thank you.